engineers gave up on the Warship engine until she walked in. The destroyer USS Halcyon didn't fail that night. It was silenced. Engineers tried every tool, every protocol. Nothing worked. The warship was dying in the middle of a storm. Until she walked in. A woman no one recognized. No rank, no ID. Just calm eyes. And a black card clearance tag that should not exist. She touched the engine once, and the turbine tried to breathe again. But right when she brought it back to life, a warning flashed across the deck. Someone outside the ship had taken control, and the intruder used a backdoor code she created. That's when she whispered the words that froze every sailor alive. They know who I am. The destroyer USS Halcyon wasn't supposed to stop. Not during trials, not during a live fire patrol. And definitely not in the middle of a rising electrical storm. But on that night, the impossible happened. The engines, massive roaring million-dollar beasts, went silent. For a warship, silence is terrifying. Inside the engineering deck, emergency lights flickered like dying stars. Panels buzzed. Cooling ducts whined. The smell of burned wiring crawled through the air. Officers barked orders. Sailors scrambled with tools, and every minute that passed felt like another step toward disaster. Lieutenant Briggs, chief engineer, slammed a wrench onto the console. Core temperatures stable. Barely. He growled. But the turbine won't cycle. It's dead. And unless someone resurrects it, the whole ship is a sitting duck. No one answered. No one could. Even the senior engineers had stepped away from the console, defeated, their faces shining with sweat and frustration. They had tried everything. Reset protocols, bypass lines, backup igniters. Nothing. "Sir," one petty officer whispered, "the captain wants an update." Briggs stared at the dark turbine core. "Tell him the truth," he said. "We're out of solutions." The ship creaked under the growing waves. The storm thickened around them. Radar screens blinked unstable signatures. The Halcyon had drifted into contested waters. Dangerous, even on a good day. Failure wasn't just embarrassing. It was deadly. Briggs pressed his palms into his eyes. Damn it. There has to be a way. Then over the comms, a voice crackled, requesting permission to enter engineering bay. Briggs frowned. Everyone looked up. The voice wasn't familiar. Before he could reply, the sliding doors parted with a low hydraulic hiss. And she stepped inside. A woman in a soaked navy blue field jacket, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with a piece of paracord. She held no rank insignia, no badge, no toolkit, just calm eyes that scanned the room like she had been here before, like she knew where everything belonged. Briggs snapped, "Who the hell are you? This deck is restricted." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked straight toward the dead turbine, ignoring every stare, every whisper. Her boots left a trail of water. Her presence left silence behind her. "Stop right there!" Briggs shouted, but she didn't. She stopped only when she reached the core, her fingers brushing lightly over the metal casing, tracing the scorch marks, with a strangely familiar confidence. Only then did she speak. "You overloaded your secondary ignition bus," she said quietly. "That's why the fail-safe tripped, and why your turbine refuses to restart." Briggs froze. The engineers exchanged confused looks. "How do you know that?" he demanded. She wiped her thumb across a broken seal on the side panel. "Because this engine wasn't built for the modifications you forced on it. You pushed it 3% beyond tolerance. Enough for an instant shutdown, not enough to destroy it." Her voice was steady, precise, almost surgical. Briggs swallowed. "Who are you?" Finally she turned to him. "A consultant," she said, temporarily assigned. That made Briggs lose it. "We don't have any consultants on board," he shouted. "And even if we did, they don't just walk into my engine room and lecture me about tolerances." Her expression didn't change, but she reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Before Briggs could stop her, she pulled out a small laminated tag. One glance, and the entire room went silent. It wasn't a rank badge, wasn't a Navy ID. It was something rarer, something most sailors only heard rumors about. A black card clearance tag. Engineering Division. Special Projects Unit. A place that didn't officially exist. Briggs felt his throat tighten. The temperature in the room suddenly felt colder. "You're with them?" he whispered. She slipped the card back into her jacket. "I'm here to fix your engine, if you'll let me." The deck crew shuffled aside without hesitation. Briggs swallowed his pride. "Fine, but I'm warning you, the turbine's shot. We've already torn through half the manual." She crouched near an access panel. "That's your problem," she murmured. "You're using the manual." With a flick of her wrist, she removed the panel screws faster than anyone expected. Her movements were clean, practiced, almost rehearsed. As she leaned in, Briggs noticed something else, something small, almost invisible, inked behind her left ear. A marking, a tiny wrench crossed with a lightning bolt. His stomach dropped. He knew that symbol. Every engineer did. It belonged to a group of specialists who never appeared on crew rosters, who worked on the systems no one else dared to touch, who were called only when a ship was at the edge of catastrophe. And they were always rumored to be deceased. Briggs whispered, almost trembling, "That mark. You can't be—" She didn't let him finish. "Pass me a diagnostic lead," she said calmly. Briggs obeyed automatically. She connected it by feel alone, not even glancing at the ports, and sparks jumped across the cables like they recognized her. "She knows this engine," a sailor breathed. "No," Briggs said quietly. "She helped design it." While the crew watched, she performed a sequence no one had ever seen before, locking power drains, isolating thermal stacks, resetting ignition memory, overriding the turbine's fear of restarting after a catastrophic stop. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, her eyes locked on the humming machinery as if listening for a heartbeat, returning to life. Minutes passed. The storm roared outside. The ship groaned. Then the woman whispered, "Briggs, initiate auxiliary spin." He hesitated. "If the core isn't stable, the ignition will—" "Trust me." Something in her voice, calm yet absolute, cut through every doubt. Briggs flipped the switch. The turbine coughed, shuddered, glowed faintly. A pulse returned, weak but alive. The crew gasped. She didn't smile. She simply tightened another cable and said, "Again." Briggs engaged the spin-up a second time. This time the turbine responded louder, its heartbeat growing, its systems reawakening like a beast emerging from deep sleep. The tremors under the deck changed. Power surged through the conduits. Screens flickered back to life. It was working. The impossible was happening. But right before anyone could celebrate, right before Briggs could tell the captain the nightmare was ending, a warning klaxon screamed across the bay. The lights cut to crimson. Briggs spun to the console. "What now?" The woman stood slowly, her face draining of color as she stared at a blinking code spreading across the board. The turbine wasn't failing. Someone had accessed it from outside. She whispered, barely audible, "That's not a malfunction." The engineers froze. "That's an intrusion signal." Briggs paled. "You mean—" She cut him off, her voice cold. "Someone out there is trying to take control of your warship." She looked at the dark corners of the bay, then back at the trembling radar screen. And they know exactly what I just fixed. Her next words silenced the entire deck. They know who I am. For a moment, the engineering bay felt colder than the ocean outside. Briggs stared at the intrusion alert, its red symbol pulsing like a heartbeat. External access? That's impossible. Our systems are isolated. Not anymore, she said softly. Whoever is tapping in knows the old backdoor protocol, the one we buried years ago. Briggs stiffened. You mean the protocol you... Yes. She didn't let him finish. The one I created. Her voice carried a weight that silenced everyone. The cruiser rocked as another wave slammed the hull. The turbine core throbbed with half-restored power, like a giant awakening under pressure. She stepped toward the console, fingers flying across keys, overriding fail-safes faster than Briggs could follow. Briggs swallowed. If they take control of propulsion, they can strand us. Or ram us. She didn't respond, her focus razor-sharp. Lines of code streamed across the screen. She identified the intrusion path in seconds. A ghost signature. Familiar. Too familiar. Briggs watched her expression change. Recognition, pain, a hint of fear. You know who's doing this, he whispered. She nodded once. When I left Special Projects, I wasn't the only one who disappeared, she said quietly. Someone else didn't take it well. The room tensed. Can you shut them out? Briggs asked. That depends, she murmured, on whether they still think like I do. Her hands blurred across the controls. She forced the turbine into manual isolation, severed the legacy port, and encrypted the ignition pipeline with a code so old it existed only in her memory. The ship hummed deeper, stronger, fighting for its life. A shrill aerotone cut through the air. The intruder was counterattacking. The console screen flickered. A single message appeared. Briggs felt his spine tighten. What does that mean? She exhaled slowly. It means he always suspected I survived. Who? My former partner. More code surged across the console. The intruder was pushing hard, trying to overwhelm her firewall. This is not just sabotage, she said. It's a challenge. The turbine lights dimmed. Briggs shouted, We're losing power again. She didn't panic. Instead, she leaned closer to the console and typed a command sequence. No one else in the Navy would ever recognize. A personal signature key. A handshake protocol. Her final card. The system froze, paused, then all intrusion signals vanished, like extinguished flames. The turbine surged back to full strength, roaring alive. The lights brightened. The Halcyon regained her heartbeat. Briggs stared. You beat him? No. She stood slowly. I answered him. Briggs frowned. What do you mean? She pointed at the message that blinked one last time before the system reset. A new line appeared beneath it. The words faded. Silence filled the room. Briggs looked at her, confused and uneasy. Is this over? She shook her head. Engines are stable. The ship is safe. But this is just the beginning. He stepped closer. Then tell me the truth. Who are you really? For the first time since she boarded the Halcyon, she allowed a small, tired smile. I was the architect of this engine, the one they said died during Project Maelstrom, but death was convenient for them and for me. Briggs felt the weight of her words. Why come back now? She brushed a hand over the humming turbine. Because something bigger is coming, she whispered. And you'll need me more than you realize. The storm outside finally began to break, its thunder rolling away into the distance. But inside the ship, a different storm lingered. Quiet, invisible, waiting for its next move. Briggs straightened. What do we tell the captain? Tell him the engine's online. she said, stepping toward the exit. "And tell him nothing more." "Where are you going?" She paused at the doorway, the emergency lights framing her silhouette. "To finish what was started years ago," she said softly, "and to stop the man who thinks I should have stayed dead." Then she walked out, boots echoing through the steel corridor, leaving behind a crew who would never forget the night a dead engineer returned, and saved a warship that had already given up on itself.